Welcome back to Out of Possession, guys. And today I'm joined by Gigi, and we're doing our Premier League team of the season. And I can tell you right now, it's a banger of an episode. You might think, how do I know that? And it's because we've already recorded it. We're doing the intro second, so I can tell you what we've talked about. And we started not with the team of the season, but with an interesting discussion about the tactical landscape of the Premier League and how interesting that is. And then we jumped into the team of the season. And I think it was quite fun. There were some interesting picks, some controversial picks, but we discussed each position quite thoroughly, I think it's fair to say. So maybe this is a bit of a longer episode, but I hope you guys enjoy it.
No, the question I wanted to ask was if you had to rate the Premier League season from a tactical point of view out of 10, would you rate it and why?
Ooh. I like that question. We'll get on into the team of the season in a bit, like I probably have just said in the intro, but we'll tangent for a little bit first. Ooh, That's a very good question. Like in terms of enjoyment tactically, or in terms of like evolution, or just an overall package?
No, we'll do overall package, but I think I'm more leaning towards enjoyment.
Enjoyment's like a 4. In fact, I think the Premier League's been really poor tactically. I think it's low, just because I think so many games are coming down to who's winning the duels in midfield, and that's literally it. Because when I watch a game, like I'm looking for something interesting or new that's happened, so then I can go on TikTok after and go, "Did you notice this great tactical change?" That da da da. That's what I want for the content. And I find so many games I watch and I just get nothing because it's. You get what I mean? It is literally just, Tonali tackled a bit better in midfield than Caicedo. And therefore, that's why they won the game. Like, that is just the reason so often now. And I think that's quite boring. I think in the, like, when the best play the best, I think quite often you do get something quite interesting. And especially in the Champions League as well, when you compare it to that, you always get something interesting, which is why I really enjoyed the Champions League this season. But I think, tactically, the Premier League has been quite homogenous, I'd say, this year, and quite boring.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think when I looked at it, obviously going into this, I kind of lean towards a 6, but I think I might even drop it down to a 5, just because I'm not a fan of the Premier League essentially going back to its roots, if that makes sense. It feels like I'm watching football of 20 years ago, which sounds weird because in theory this shouldn't be the case. You have better players, or maybe in theory this should be the case because the Premier League is we have so much talent. It's just we're just cancelling each other out now. So maybe it does actually come down to, the ground duels. I feel like it feels like if there's anything that epitomizes the Premier League this season, it's two words: ground duels. That's what it feels like to me. And that's kind of annoying me because 2 years ago we weren't even at that point in terms of evolution. Even with the managers that were coming in, you'd think the likes of Areola or Maresca, we'd move away from this kind of league template, but it's not the case. If anything, it looks like if Arsenal win the league's just going to double down and this is going to be the standard. And don't get me wrong, I think Arsenal are a very good team, but for me, what they do on the ball, I'm not typically a fan of. So
I think Tijani Reinders probably epitomizes it, right? Just as a player who's maybe not succeeded. Because I think Reinders is a fantastic footballer. I think he's so good. But if you look at the impact he's had, it's been minimal. He has been poor this season. Yeah. And the reason for that is because he is just an absolute cone off the ball. Like, if you look at any defensive chart, Reinders is always right at the bottom. And that is why he's not been successful, because he is so bad at those ground
That's very true.
I think that's quite interesting. I reckon if you put him in almost any other league in the world, he'd do really, really well. And he did do really, really well in Milan. But he's just not really built for the Premier League in a way. Right, so we'll just hop right into the team of the season. And naturally, we're going to start at the back and work our way forward. So we'll start with the goalkeepers. And I think there are 2, maybe 3 names that will be thrown in the hat here. I think there's one that's clearly better than the rest. And I'd be interested to know what names you have written down, because I assume they're the same as mine.
Yeah, so I've got Sunderland's keeper Robin Royce, I've got City's Donnarumma, and I've got Arsenal's David Raya. Those are the 3 names that I have. And for me, I went with the goalkeeper that we look at goalkeepers now and how pivotal they are in terms of not only just preventing goals happening, but actually in a way making goals happen now. And for me, David Raya, in terms of the keeper role, fits both perfectly. The best at both, in my opinion, even though I've got a slight bias towards Donnarumma in terms of the traditional goalkeeper style. But I think we've even had discussions about this in terms of the ball playing ability. Like, he's just a net negative, and he's just going to remain like that for the rest of his career, unfortunately.
Me personally, I've jotted Donnarumma down because I think he is in the general conversation. But if you were to ask just me about my opinion, I wouldn't have Donnarumma even anywhere near a top three goalkeeper in the league this season. Because, like you say, I just think he is so net negative in terms of that ball playing factor. And maybe if he's at a team like a Fulham, lower down, a Sunderland, that's great. He's a fantastic goalkeeper. But I think that lack of ball playing ability really harms your impact at a top level team, especially a team like Manchester City, where the whole ethos is built around we are going to play out from the back, and then you bring in a goalkeeper that stops you being able to do that because everyone's pressing man to man. You gain your advantage through the goalkeeper. You can third man bounce. You have that overload, right? And having a keeper that can ball play means more often than not, you should be able to play through the press. If not, it gives you a significant advantage. That's undeniable. And with Donnarumma, you just lose that advantage completely. Like we've seen Pep do weird and wacky shit this season to try and mitigate the problem that is Donnarumma. Like we've seen him drop Rodri and Bernardo Silva all the way back into the box to just take the ball off his feet and really babysit him. And it doesn't work because no matter how good you are at footballers, if you've got a really physical player like a Declan Rice, for example, man marking you around the pitch, you're never really going to be able to create the space to go and play through that press. And I think I say that we actually did manage to do it against Arsenal, but it just makes it so much harder. And despite the fact he is probably the best shot stopper in the league, I wouldn't have him there because I think that ability is so important now. And David Raya is the best of all worlds for me. I think he's a really nice conversation. That's not the word. Mesh. I can't think of the word for that. Anyway, I think the Sunderland guy, Robin
I definitely
Woods,
agree.
I can't say his name, which isn't great. I'll just call him Robin. But I think he definitely deserves a shout. We were just talking about Sunderland off camera and why we maybe think they might drop off a bit next season. But a massive reason of why they are so successful this season is because of the goalkeeper. If you look at the XG table, I think Sunderland are 18th, we just said. Like, to go from being 18th to being 12th or 11th, wherever they are now, a massive part of that is because the goalkeeper is saving them in so many situations. Like, they have won so many games 2-1, 1-0. And if you have a different keeper who's not as good as a shot stopper, they then become 2-2, 1-1, and suddenly you are far further down the table and possibly in a relegation battle. Like, I'd say he's their most important player and certainly their best player this season. But I think he definitely deserves a shout.
No, I think it definitely deserves a shout. Donnarumma, for me, I just had him there just because I feel like, you know, it was the shot stopping for me. Like, for me, like, with him especially, I know that's all he's going to give in terms of, you know, his positive attributes. The problem that I have with his ball playing is there's just a lack of detail in it. You see it like every week when you watch City play, like the lack of detail in the goalkeeping compared to Trafford's. I mean, Trafford's only played like cup games, but the cup game against Liverpool that City played, you could see the detail of the passing, and it's just like I feel like a lot of it is to do with probably just like how, you know, them to see the position. I feel like for Trafford, he sees it a lot differently to how Donnarumma sees it, and that could come down to probably the country of origin as well. Donnarumma is Italian, and for me, when you think of an Italian goalkeeper, it's their job to practically prevent the goal from landing in the back of their net, to be honest, where the ball playing ability, it's not something that is essential. It's not a central aspect of goalkeeping play in Italy at all, compared to England now, where everybody's an outfield player, including the goalkeeper these days.
Yeah, I really like that point on the empathy of passing, I think is what John McKenzie calls it quite a lot, because it is just such a massive factor, and it's something no one really ever brings up, because if you look at a spreadsheet, Donnarumma's passing actually looks really fine, but it's not fine. So I think when I think of a ball-playing goalkeeper, I think naturally the first image that comes into your head is Ederson playing like a 60-meter ping up to the halfway line perfectly. But in reality, that's not what it's about at all. It's really about having a guy who's going to do the simple things really effectively and really consistently. And Donnarumma doesn't do that. He might do an action a bit too slowly, for example, and that means then that the ball doesn't move to the free man fast enough, and then you're not out the press. And like you mentioned on the empathy of pass, so often he'll pass the ball to Kushnov, and it's slightly behind him, maybe on his weak foot, and then instead of Kushnov just being able to go bang, first touch into the space, Man City are out and we're attacking, Kushnov then has to kind of fumble around with it, getting it out his feet for a second, and now the opposition are pressing us high, and maybe we lose the ball or have to punt it long instead. And those are the things that people won't notice, really, because he hasn't made a big error. So or he hasn't played a sick pass. It's not what people think about a ball-playing goalkeeper being, but I think it's exactly what a ball-playing goalkeeper is. And it's the same with any position.
100%.
What matters is doing the simple things really effectively rather than the big flashy booms, apart from maybe if you're like an Erling Haaland up front. I think that's the one exception.
Yeah. I think one thing I wanted to ask you, if there's one thing for you that stands out with Donnarumma? Not Donnarumma, sorry. Well, actually, for you, because I'm more like Donnarumma pro, even though I know his flaws, and I feel like you're more against Donnarumma in terms of the standard of goalkeeping. There's one thing that stands out for you and Donnarumma. What would it be, and why?
I think there's two things. I think that the first thing is what we just talked about is the empathy of passing and not being able to do the consistent things really effectively. But the second
Mm.
thing would actually be the shot stopping, because I think the conversation with Donnarumma is the trade off between ball playing and shot stopping actually worth it? And
Yeah, this
you
is what I
can't
wanted to.
definitively say it is or it isn't. I think if you have someone like a Courtois, who is an insane level best in the world shot stopper, I'd actually argue that's probably worth it. But I don't think Donnarumma's really at that level at all, because he does make a lot of mistakes. Yes, he has the potential to do a world-class, unbelievable save, but how often is that actually happening? Maybe once every 4 games, once every 5 games? It's certainly not enough to justify having this goalkeeper over somebody else.
Mhm.
And so often you'll see Donnarumma concede a goal where, if you are this world-class goalkeeper you claim to be, you should be saving that. And obviously
Yeah,
he is a good shot stopper. That's not what I'm saying. I just don't think he's this best in the world guy that people make him out to be. I think he's actually far below Courtois' level. And because of that, for me, the trade-off certainly isn't worth it. So to answer your question, I'd say his not bad shot stopping, but maybe his overrated shot stopping is one of the things that stands out.
yeah. I think both of us have gone. I think both of us have had Raya definitively as the goalkeeper that we're going to have in our team of the season. I think for me, what stands out with Raya is just 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 the sheer proactivity that he has as a goalkeeper. I think when I look at when I look at a future goalkeeper and I look at probably the evolution of a goalkeeper, I feel like Raya epitomizes that for me in terms of how a goalkeeper should behave. I know Neuer took it. I know Neuer is the standard for it, but I'm talking obviously in terms of like English football. Like Raya is probably the closest we're going to have to what I think is a perfect goalkeeper today, and maybe for as long as he plays, to be honest, because I don't actually really see a goalkeeper playing to that level that he's shown in the past 3 years. It arguably rivals like the best peaks of the best goalkeepers that the Premier League has had in history. But it's so different because a lot of the best ones were just traditional goalkeepers, you could argue. Maybe from apart from Van der Sar, who had sweeper keeper tendencies in him, but not to this degree. This is a whole nother level.
I'd argue the best thing about Riot is kind of what we just talked about, and it's that he's
Mm.
insanely consistent. Like, he does the easy things so well across every category. Like, he doesn't really
Yeah.
have a clear weakness, and I think that just makes him so, so good. Like, in terms of his ball playing, no one's saying he's an Edison or he's this ridiculously good, like, Neuer-esque player, but he's a good 7 or 8 out of 10. He's very solid. I think it's the same with his shot stopping. Again, no one's claiming he's a Courtois or a Donnarumma even, but again, he's a very good 7 out of 10, and he does the easy stuff very well. Same thing with the cross claiming, something that Donnarumma is actually very, very weak at too. Ryan will do it really consistently every single time, and I think that is really valuable, because the big actions never happen frequently enough to be able to shift a title race significantly, unless you are doing them frequently enough, like Courtois is, but that is extremely rare. So again, I think the main thing is consistency, and David Raya is the most consistent, which is why I think he's the best, and it's why he's in my team of the season. We'll move on to the left back now, and I think this one's quite easy, but we'll throw 2 names in the hat just to have a bit of conversation anyway. I've got written down Nico Riley, and I've got written down Marc Cucurella, and I think there's quite a clear winner. I think you'll agree.
Yeah. Clear
do you have any other
there.
names out of interest that put in the hat that we can talk about? Because I think there's quite a lot of exciting fullbacks in the Premier League at the moment, because I think it's a very exciting position, because it's how teams are finding their advantage. Like, we talked about man-for-man pressing quite a lot with the goalkeepers, and I think it's exactly the same thing with the fullbacks, because they can become your free player so easily that now they're so advantageous. And I think we've kind of moved away from an era where fullbacks were quite specialized, in my opinion, of being great at one particular thing, to now moving into an era where it's almost better to have a fullback who is a 7 out of 10 consistent player in the majority of fullback roles, whether that be bombing on down the touchline, inverting, box crashing. You want them to kind of be able to do a bit of everything, rather than having a guy who is 9 out of 10 at one thing but can't really do anything else.
Yeah. So the names that I have, you know what? Mine were very left field. Well, 2 of them were. I don't feel like one of them is. So my 3 were Lewis Hall from Newcastle. I also had Truffert from Bournemouth, and I had Diouf from West Ham. Those were my 3. Obviously, Nicola Riley is my definitive one, but those 3, I think for me, like, their profiles are very, very like different in terms of how each of them play. But I think I'm a fan of all of them just because of attacking value, in my opinion. I think Truffert is very interesting. I've looked at him as like one of my signings of the season, if anything, from the minute he joined, just because I think, again, like the left back position is such a good position to look at, but it's also probably one of the more like disposable ones, or is it disposable? No, disposable or slash expendable. Like it's easily replaced in the sense that you could sell Kirkez and bring in a Truffert, and nothing really changes that much to like actually point out and be like, oh, like Bournemouth have gotten worse here, when actually Truffert could kick on and perform at the same level that Kirkers did in the 24-25 season. So for him, for me, he is probably the left back that I think everyone should be looking at in next season. If anything, that is a potential sleeper for probably best left back in the league, potentially, depending on how Bournemouth and Marco Rose look. But Nico O'Reilly is incredible. Like this player is basically what positionless football is now. Like if you're looking at anybody that plays positionless football, look no further than that man. And Nico O'Reilly is what Miles Lewis Skelly thinks he is, in terms of like MLS has the ball carrying, sure, but for me, I don't look at MLS as, you know, a potentially great left back just because of the size and the profile. Like Nico O'Reilly is built like a centre back, but moves like a number 10, but essentially plays at left back. Like this is basically a number 10 or a very, very technically ultra technical 8 playing at left back. Like it feels unfair.
I don't know if you've seen, there's a moment from the Arsenal game that I think epitomizes what he's about, where he's under pressure in the corner and you think, oh, he's certainly lost the ball here. And he just kind of pulls some funky shit out his ass. And he dances around Declan Rice and whoever else is there and keeps the ball and gets an attack going. And I think that's what Nico O'Reilly's all about, right? Maybe he's becoming slightly overrated, in my opinion, especially defensively, 1v1. But I think he's almost the perfect modern Premier League player because, like you mentioned there, he's 6'4". He's almost as tall as Haaland is now, which is insane. And he has that box crashing threat. He can also do the overlapping role. He can come and invert because he's so technical. He's really like an 8 out of 10 in every position. And that makes him the perfect modern fullback because depending on what the opposition do, Pep can use Nico O'Reilly in whatever way he wants to counter that, which is why for me he's best. On your Truffert point, I don't think he'll ever become one of the best in the league because I kind of categorize him as more of a hyper-specialized player than someone like Nico O'Reilly, and I don't really think that's what big clubs want at the moment. I think they want these guys like Nico O'Reilly, like Cucurella, like Nuno Mendes at PSG, who can do a bit of everything to a very good level, rather than having someone who can do one thing to a world-class level.
Oh, you know, I think that's fair. I think if there's anything that will disrupt Truffert from getting that move, it probably will be that. I can agree somewhat with the hyper specialist thing, especially because when you look at how he would give value to the big teams, it would be very difficult for Truffert to play at City when you've got like Truffert, like with the way how he'll play, that would interfere with Doku basically on the same side. So no, I can definitely agree with that.
I think he's more of a transitional guy as well. So much of his value comes from exploding into that space. And when you make the switch to being at a big club, I just don't think that's particularly scalable because big teams are always facing low blocks. So there isn't that space to kind of explode into. And I think Kirkez has been a lot better in the second half of the season, but to a certain extent, we've seen him struggle with that a bit as well because he's not really at the technical level, in my opinion, to be able to really thrive for a top club like a Liverpool. Right, Nico O'Reilly is in the team then. We'll go left centre-back. And I think recently this one's become a bit closer. I think previously it was clearly Gabriel, and Gabriel's certainly still in the mix. But I think you could also make a case for putting Mark Gahey into the team now, just because of the impact he's had at City has been massive. And it's a shame it takes these players to move to a top club for people to like us to actually look at them and say, you should be in this conversation.
Be like, oh, this is actually a player. Yeah.
that is the truth. So he's had to move to City to be put in here, and he has done that, and now he's in here. So would you agree with that? Do you have any other names to throw in the ring?
So Gahey for me, like, I can't believe that. Again, I'm with you. Like, it's almost kind of like the analogy that I'm going to use now. It's not even an analogy. There's evidence that supports this. You have, let's say, like a foreign player. They have no appearances for their country, but as soon as they move to a Premier League team, boom, like their first international appearance, their first international cap, they get it at the next possible international break. And I feel like this is what Mark Gahey is. Like I think this is why I don't care for public perception as much, because you can watch a play, because a lot of people don't watch these players outside of the big teams, and so the way how they judge them, it's like the sample size, it's small. Like they can only really judge Gahey off like the two TV games that Palace are playing, when you actually have to go out of your way to probably not even just watch Palace, but probably actually look deeper in to kind of probably how they are tactically by reading articles about them and stuff like that. So for me, having Gahey on this list is warranted because he's literally been great all year. He's literally been great all season. And this move to City makes so much sense in terms of the way how City want to play. And he's literally a cheat code because he basically can play with both feet. And, I think that left side that City have, I think having him in there, it's brought such positivity in terms of how they look. Having Gahey there, it kind of allows Deco Riley again to kind of do what he does. But also, and I think this is something that is very under discussed, the relationship that Gahey and Doku have, for me, I actually think is very top as well in terms of how they find each other a lot. They're very close to each other when they're attacking, especially like in the opposition's half. And that's something for me that I've noticed, especially like in the Burnley game, for instance, like City had a lot of the ball, and you're just seeing again Doku and Gahey in close proximity of each other, and that stuff is just good to see because you look at a player who was mainly doing defending at Palace, of course, because of the type of team that they are, to Man City, and you're thinking, okay, like how can he actually add value into their attack? Again, the scalability, and I think he's just been a seamless fit for that. So he's just superb.
I think that's a really interesting point that you made there about how obviously Palace are a defensively minded team. They're not going to have a lot of the ball. And for me, by far, Gahey's biggest strength is his on-ball ability. Like, he's brilliant how he carries the ball, his press resistance, how he finds his progressive passes. He's one of the best in the league quite comfortably, if not arguably the best in the league. Now Van Dijk's fallen off a bit. But obviously, Palace never really had the ball. Therefore, he couldn't really showcase that often, especially if you're a guy who likes data as well, which I quite do. Unless you're adjusting every metric for possession, if you looked at something like what defender is making the most progressive passes, Gahey would be incredibly skewed down to where he actually should be, because Palace simply aren't having enough of the ball for him to have enough opportunities to be able to make a lot of progressive passes. And then you have the context of, are the ones that he's making just because there's a lot of space in transition? Like, it's hard to be able to actually tell how good this guy is when he's in such a different environment to what you'd expect him to be in at a top club. And I think, like you say, he's scaled amazingly. The only thing I will say on Gahey is I think sometimes defensively he gets caught out a bit. And when he does get caught out, which is quite rare, he doesn't have that recovery pace that maybe someone like Kushnov has to be able to get back. But 99% of the game, he reads the game excellently, which is why I think he's a bit underrated defensively, because he just makes it look really easy because he reads the game so well. Yeah. He doesn't have to do the flashy stuff, which is always, again, what I look for in the defender is, can you do the easy stuff really effectively? And I think Gahey does that really well. The other guy written down here is Gabriel, and I think he'd probably be the one I'd put in the team over Gahey, just because I think he's probably been more impactful overall. Like, in terms of a 1v1 defender, I don't think there's many better than Gabriel, apart from maybe his teammate beside him in the league. He's winner, rapid in his recovery pace. Like, he's outstanding. Maybe he's slightly suspect on the ball. I think that's a limitation of Gabriel, but he's not bad by any means. And then obviously his biggest threat, if you like, is those aerial dual ability from the corners, which is so prevalent, especially when talking about Arsenal this season. So who would you go for? I assume you have Gabriel as well, right?
I've actually got Saliba purely for. Well, I didn't really look into it in terms of like.
Fair enough.
I didn't look at it in terms of like the side of the centre backs. I've just gone with centre. I've not really gone that into detail with them with those types of aspects of centre back play, just because it would have been very difficult for me to narrow down to like the two best. So I think for me, I think the left centre back, if we're going to do that, which I have no problem
we'll do it. I think you're always probably more interesting, so we'll do that, and I'll slightly readjust my team.
No, that's fine. So for me, initially, and the name will surprise you with the set. So Saliba was the definite that I was going to have in this team, but the centre back partner, I had Konza initially.
I thought you were going
Now,
to say Konsa.
now initially Konza was in my team, but but then the point with Gehi and the scalability, I think that was something that again really stood out to me. So these two have ended up being my centre backs. But to touch on Konza, I honestly think the job that he's actually done at Villa over the past few years is stuff that actually needs to be praised a lot more. Not only is this player basically been the cornerstone for nearly 10 years, signed at 2018, he signed at 2018-19, after doing really well at Brentford, I think even for like 1 year. But also the amount of centre-back partners he's had to play with over the course of his Premier League career. He's gone from Mings to Diego Carlos to Pau Torres, and like again, just still kept to that level. I know there's times where he will be defensively shaky, but I think a lot of that is actually due to the partners he's actually playing with. There's no actual consistency there. There's times now where Villa are even playing him and Lindelof together. If you thought, and that's even at that says a lot for a player to have this many changes, but still kind of be the cornerstone, and Emery to look at him and be like, yes, this is basically like the first. Well, actually, not really the first, because I say Martinez is probably the first player they look at in terms of the team sheet, but this is one of the cornerstones of that team. So for me, I was really big on giving constant praise, but I thought about it a lot more, and I thought, yeah, he needed to be in here.
Right, so you've gone for Gabriel and Gay then.
I've gone for Gabriel. I've gone for Gabriel and Gehi.
Saliba and Gay, sorry.
Oh yeah. Sorry. No, I've gone with Saliba and Gehi just because of just how the way those two play. I think again, like for me, I lean into more like what they offer in terms of like the modern Premier League, and these two are by far head and shoulders the most comfortable defenders in terms of how they play, in terms of the confidence they give to their teams. Like for me, like Saliba has taken a major step up this season. There was a point in the first half of this season where he was stepping into midfield. He did this a lot in the Champions League games, and that was one of my like biggest things with him. Even though I know he was a great talent at Marseille on loan, and obviously like his first few years at Arsenal, like my gripe with him was, the ball playing thing. I know you can take that to another level, and I think he's taken that to another level for me, to the point where like, I mean, Arsenal might even, I mean, there's probably going to be times again next season where you're going to see him in the DM area, in the DM zone of the pitch, really, just because of how comfortable he is as a centre back on the ball.
I think Saliba's clearly the number one non-negotiable. I think for me, he's arguably the best centre-back in the world at the moment. I think he's just unbelievable at everything. And again, I think the only reason why people think Gabriel is better is because he does the flashy stuff more often. And like almost any position in the defence, I think the guy that's doing the consistent things and making it look easy is the better centre-back. I think it's almost what we see with Gehi and Kushnov a lot as well. Kushnov has that great recovery pace, and so he's doing the flashy things all the time. But I think Gehi's the better centre-back. He's just slightly more boring, and that leads to him being underrated quite a lot. But I think Gehi's definitely in with a shout. I would just edge it to Gabriel and Saliba, though. We have a disagreement.
I think I'm guessing Gehi is like, he's the one that's been picked here. It's just whoever's going to partner him. I'm okay to concede with Gabriel, because with Gabriel, I think what he's doing is, again, if we're talking style of defending, this is a stopper. This is like if you play FM, this is basically a central defender, and the role and the duty that you give him, it's just literally to stop the ball. I know he can obviously do more stuff than just stopping play, but there's no one in the league probably better right now in terms of a central defender whose job is literally to stop play than Gabriel. Gabriel's basically like a bouncer. If you've not got ID, you're not getting in the club right now.
I think it's quite important to think about like a partnership as well. If we want to build this as a team, which is what I've tried to do, I don't know if that's how you did yours, but I'm not sure Gehi and Saliba work as well together as Gabriel and Saliba, just because I think Gehi and Saliba are quite similar profiles. Whereas Gabriel kind of mitigates where Saliba's weaknesses are quite well, which is why they work so well together. Again, same thing with Gehi and Kushnov. They mitigate each other's weaknesses fantastically, which is why they work so well together. So we'll go with Gabriel and Saliba then, and Arsenal duo, which brings us on to the right back. I think the right back's really interesting because I think there's quite a lot of names you can make a case for here. I've got written down for Reece James. But then obviously you have this the conversation of, do you actually class Reece James as a right back this season, or is he more of a midfielder in your eyes?
I class him as a right back still. But I think the way he's playing right back is obviously very different. And to be honest, like we knew he could do this. If anyone knows about Reece James's career path, especially that loan spell that he did at Wigan a couple of years ago, he played in midfield during that time. But so I think this is, if anything, this has been something in the making. It's not something that's just randomly occurred where it's like, oh, like this is somebody who was playing as one type of fullback his entire career, and now he's suddenly become a midfielder. This is always somebody who had we saw signs of him potentially playing as this midfielder. I still class him as a fullback just because if judging on how the midfield that we're going to make, we'd probably want him more in the kind of like right back area rather than him being in the middle of the pitch like 80% of the time. But I think Reece James is incredible. I think it's such a shame how bad Chelsea are and that he extended his deal, because this is basically a player who I think had City written all over him a few years ago. Really should have signed probably a few years ago for City. Obviously, it's difficult for a player like that to move to, City, but that for me, that type of player, like they don't grow on trees a lot. Like I can't tell you the next time England are going to produce another, Reece James at this level. He's just incredible.
Yeah, I think if you're classing Reece James as a right back, he's certainly the obvious option. Like if you're picking anyone else, you're a bit crazy because he is just the best of the best. I will say on England not producing another talent like that, I don't think Livramento's a million miles off him. Obviously, he's not as good. That's not what I'm saying here, but I think he has the potential to get to a Reece James level. He's a player I rate really highly. I want to give
Livramento
credit as well because I think he's had a really good season.
Yes.
Especially given how bad he was last season at right back. And he was. It was horrible. But I think he's done really well in ironing out those bozo moments, if you like, where last season you'd see a vital mistake almost every game. Whereas this season, I think we've maybe seen it once, which is a fantastic improvement. And again, just in terms of doing the simple things really well, I think Núñez is excellent at it. And maybe where he falls down compared to a Reece James is just lacking in physicality compared to him very slightly. And then the decision-making in the final third, I don't think is as good. But again, I don't think he's a million miles away from Reece James, and he's had a great season. So we'll go into the midfield now. And the way we structured this is we've got a 6, an 8, and a 10 each. And naturally, we're going to move from back to front and start with the 6. And I think there's actually quite a few names you could consider here. I've got my name, which is maybe slightly biased, but I think there's so many great sixes in the league at the moment, which leads to a plethora of options. So I have written down Rodri, Elliot Anderson, Bruno Fernandes, Bruno Guimaraes, and Caicedo, who I think are all maybe worth discussing. If you want to add any names to that, like always, feel free to say now, GG.
I think we know probably what we're probably going to pick. I'm okay with that happening. I'm amazed that Xhaka hasn't been mentioned here.
I think
Xhaka. So Xhaka was actually the name I had on here as my 6. I think it's amazing the evolution he's embarked on the last 4-5 years as a midfielder and just a player in general, to go from what he was at Arsenal to obviously that Leverkusen spell to now what he's doing at something. It's amazing. I'm amazed at the craft. I never thought that Xhaka would have been able to show this level of craft for a newly promoted team. Well, maybe it's obvious that he was going to show it for a newly promoted team, but the stuff that he was doing in the first half of the season, especially the assists that he was giving at pivotal points of the season, obviously Sunderland really needed to get to a great start, and he was a massive contributor in that. So for me, Xhaka was the name on my team, but I know what the standard of this position is, and I've talked about it with friends. I've even talked about it on vids that I've made. And for me, I think we're going to go with your boy in this position.
With Rodri.
Yeah.
I think there's two ways to do this, actually. Because it depends. If we're doing it based on impact this season, I'd happily go against Rodri just because he hasn't played that many minutes. But if we were doing it on that, I still wouldn't go Xhaka, to be honest with you. I'd go Elliot Anderson because I think he's performed at a higher level than Xhaka. And without Elliot Anderson, I think Forest are relegated because I think he's so unbelievable. In terms of every metric this season, Xhaka is top. Not Xhaka is top, sorry. Elliot Anderson is top.
Anderson is top,
top. You want to talk about progressive passes, he's unbelievable. Want to talk about ground duels, which is, if we go rewind to the start, that was kind of our category for how the most important thing in the Premier League this season. Elliot Anderson is the best at that. And you can see why every Big Six team are willing to pay 110 million, 100 million for this guy. Because I think he's just purely elite. But I don't think he's as elite as Rodri. I think Rodri is just the best. And it's that simple by quite a way.
Yeah. Yeah. The standard of the position, I think he's now getting into conversations. I mean, I don't know where you stand on this. I actually don't know where anybody stands on this, but I think this is probably the greatest DM I've probably ever watched, if I'm going to be honest. I know what he did in 23-24. He obviously had that big injury in 24-25. There was doubts into what he was going to do this season, but I think if there's any game that's going to epitomize how good he is in terms of the standards and the levels, it's when City played Sunderland away. What I saw in that game was unbelievable. That if you want to talk if you want to talk DM play, that was again a masterclass on how a DM should play. Bear in mind, City didn't even win the game; it was a 0-0 draw. And for some reason, you had Cherky tackling everybody for some reason that game. And for me, like Rodri, in terms of just the way he plays, just the way how he thinks, like it's just like I know there's been outstanding players, but even them at their best can't play like this player coming off an injury. That's how good he is.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of talk as well, hasn't there, about maybe Rodri dropping his level slightly. And I think that's maybe fair off the ball. He's not what he once was, because previously he was probably on the level of like a Declan Rice, not miles off the ball, whereas now he isn't the best player off the ball. He can't cover enough ground to do that. But in terms of what he does with the ball at his feet, he's as good as he's ever been. Like, you want to talk progressive passes, which is probably, in my opinion, one of the most important things a DM can do. If you want to look at that data on a per 90 basis, basically every other player in the league is on around 7, 8 for second, third, and fourth place. Rodri's on about 11 or 12 ahead. Like, he's the best by such a big margin that it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And obviously, he does have the advantage of playing for Manchester City. He's going to have a lot more of the ball than an Elliot Anderson is, for example. But even then, like, he's clearly the best. Like, you look at what Nico G is doing, and he plays that role in a very different manner. He's a much more of an aggressive destroyer type player than Rodri is. But the conversations that we're having when he came back, that Nico Gonzalez is somehow better than Rodri, I find crazy, because he's just clearly not. I think Rodri's the best, man. He's unbelievable. And like you say, that Sunderland game for me was just like, wow, because we hadn't seen him play in so long. You forget how impactful and how great this guy is. And you have that direct comparison of Nico G's played the first half, things aren't really working, we can't play through the press. Rodri comes on. I think he played about, in the first 5 minutes, maybe 4 press-breaking passes that were unbelievable. And suddenly you have Sunderland pinned in their box. You've got so much territory. And we should have gone on to win that game because we created the chances to do it.
Oh,
that was because of Rodri. The platform he gives the team to thrive is so massive. And I think people forget that platform's because of him sometimes, which leads to him being slightly underrated. Right. Number 8. I assume we've both got the same name here, which I think is quite clearly Declan Rice. I don't think anyone's that close.
We do.
In fact, this was...
However, I'm actually... I have Bernardo Silva and Declan Rice as the two. And I feel like I understand Rice's impact. I understand how good he is. However, I can't help but feel that I when doing this, I was more inclined to pick Bernardo, because you know what I think with players like Declan Rice, I just think that off the ball, this is as brave of a player as you're probably going to get in the Prem now. However, on the ball, don't get me wrong, I think he's good, but I just think in the best games, a lot of the games that Arsenal have played against the big teams that have ended up being either losses or maybe even like 0-0 draws, I can't deny and feel like if you put Bernardo Silva in place of Declan in, let's say, Arsenal's 0-0 draw with Liverpool, Arsenal probably win that game 1-0 or 2-0. I can't help but feel what I saw in the supposed title decider between City and Arsenal at home. I saw 2 8s play. I saw one that was able to show courage, not just on the ball, but off the ball. And I saw an Arsenal player who was all bark and supposedly no bite, especially when he didn't have, especially when he had the ball. When he had the ball, he couldn't really do anything. And it's not to say that Bernardo Silva is better than Declan Rice. I'm not making that discussion. That's something for people to debate. But for me, I feel like we as people get lost in terms of the number 8 role and this box to box role. It's not somebody that I think now in the year 2026 should be somebody that just covers ground from A to B off the ball. You should be able to do that also with the ball, but not with just ball carrying, but in terms of you being able to play through teams. And Declan Rice, I'm yet to see that against the best teams. And that's what my concern is with a player like that.
I think that's fair. And I want to put Bernardo Silva in the team now because I love Bernardo Silva. He's probably one of my favourite City players ever. I think not putting him in is really hard. But I'll talk about how good Bernardo Silva is first, and then I'll talk about Declan Rice because I think that's the nice way to do it. But just in terms of Bernardo and what he does for City, I think he's the most underrated player in the league by a mile. I think he's so good in terms 100. Of having the intelligence to be able to go and facilitate what the team needs doing. And we've seen him do that in 2 different ways this season. At the start of the season, it was what he was doing for Ryan Cherky. He made him unbelievable, whether that's in possession, going and being happy and having the tactical flexibility to be able to play behind him when he needs him there in central spaces, but also when Cherky wants to come inside. Bernardo can go and hold the whip, and he can do that to an elite level. And then off the ball as well, just basically holding Cherky's hand, because every time Cherky made a lot of pressing mistakes, and he did make a lot of pressing mistakes, Bernardo would instantly be there to mop it all up, and without him we would have been awful. We would have lost so many more games because of those mistakes Cherky was making on the ball. And then what we've seen in the second half of the season, when I think Semenyo's come in, he can babysit Cherky quite a bit out of possession, and we've also seen Cherky improve quite a lot out of possession, to be fair to him, to the point where Bernardo no longer needs to do that role. What he does now is on the other side, and it's for Nico O'Reilly. He makes him unbelievable because we now have that triangle of Doku, Nico O'Reilly, box crashing, and Bernardo Silva. And so often you will just see Bernardo Silva drift in at the right moment, take a man in Nico O'Reilly's space out the way, lock that man marking off there, which then creates that space for Nico O'Reilly to waltz in and score a goal. And we saw it. A great example is in the Carabao Cup final against Arsenal. Nico O'Reilly's second goal is created because Bernardo Silva makes a fantastic run to create that space there. And these things go unnoticed because people just like to watch the ball. But I think Bernardo Silva's fantastic. I wouldn't be opposed to putting him in the team at all. However, I'd argue that Declan Rice kind of is Arsenal's powerhouse, whereas I don't think Bernardo Silva is that. If you had to pick Arsenal's best player, I'd probably say Saliba or Declan Rice. Like, I think Rice is brilliant. And his level has dropped off towards the end of the season. I don't think that's undeniable at all. But I'd argue that's more because Arteta hasn't rotated him at all. Declan Rice has played 2,800 minutes in the Premier League this season in that central midfield of Arsenal, their whole gig is we're going to play really intense football and run you off the park. And you want him to play every game and maintain that level throughout. That's impossible for anyone to do. And I'd argue most of your points against Rice were games that he's played recently when he has been super fatigued at the start of the season. I think he was the best. On the ball, his ball carrying is so powerful. Off the ball, he's a freak of nature, which is why I'd put Declan Rice in this team, despite the fact that I think Bernardo Silva is brilliant.
No, of course. I think even for me, I had Declan Rice at first just because of that. But I think the stuff that Bernardo goes, he was just the name that I needed to put out there to people, just to remind people that this is a player who, if I'm going to be honest, we don't want to admit that we're going to miss when he's gone, but we will. Don't worry, we will. I'm going to miss him when he leaves. That's been one of my favorite players for 10 years. I watched him at Monaco. He was so incredible there. I watched him at City. He's been incredible basically since he stepped in. But what Declan Rice at his best is definitely that powerhouse. And again, for how Arsenal play, you remove him off the team, that team basically can't play.
Right, number 10. I think you'll think this is quite definitive, but I don't think it is as definitive. So I think the obvious answer here is Bruno Fernandes. I don't really think you can argue against that, apart from with Ryan Cherky.
I know who you've gone with. I knew it.
In fact, I think Cherky goes in this team, and I don't care if he goes in this team as a winger or a midfielder, but he's going in the team. And I think the argument for Bruno Fernandes is fair, because if we look at the impact over the course of the whole season, Bruno Fernandes' impact has been bigger simply because he's played way more minutes than Cherky. And I don't think you can really use that against him, in all fairness, because when you look at the metrics as metrics for the season, Bruno Fernandes is the clear best. However, I would argue he's kind of the clear best because he's a bit of a corner merchant. Like in terms of what he offers from open play, I don't think he's anywhere near the level that Cherki operates at. Like there's a great graph where if we're looking at XAG, which is how much XG are you assisting, so all of the kind of the counter argument to XA that people often use, that it's like, oh, Bruno's just so good because he's hyper creative rather than creating easy chances, doesn't work here. Cherki's created more XG than Bruno Fernandes has this season, full stop. Like not even per 90, and Cherki's played 1,000 less minutes. Like, I just think Cherki is quite clearly the better creator. I think Bruno's got quite lucky almost with players finishing off his chances really efficiently. And that doesn't mean he's had a bad season, because obviously he hasn't. I just don't think it's at the level that people make out.
I think with him, it's two different types of creators. I feel like one is very one is a very, in my opinion, forceful creator, because he kind of actually needs to do that for the team that he plays for. I'd say Cherki is also the same, but I feel like the way how he does it and just the type of player that he is, it makes sense for Cherki to play like that, but also create the way he creates. Like some of the passes that he tries, that little flick up volley type of pass that he does. I can only imagine him doing that, and I can't see Bruno doing that. It's not in Bruno's like DNA to pull off passes like this. It's two different types of creators for me, and I think rather than both being debated on which one is better, I think people need to appreciate the fact that the Premier League is seeing two different types of how to create a goal in this league. You have one, in my opinion, that fits the Premier League's way of how to create a goal. It's very 2000s-ish, late 90s-ish, and you have Cherki's, which I'll be honest, it belongs in the 2030s. We're not even there yet. Like it's that futuristic, the way he creates and the way how he creates assists. It's unbelievable. I have Bruno as my 10. However, I'm in agreement with Cherki being in this team. Cherki actually was in my team. I had him on the wing.
Okay.
I had him on the wing. So I'm with you on both of them need to be there.
We'll do that then. We'll put Bruno in the 10, which I think is fair. And then we'll put Cherki at right wing. So we've kind of jumped a spot there. I do want to talk about Saka quickly then, if we just move on to the right winger. Not that I think he should be in this team. He's had a very underrated season in terms of, I don't think he's anywhere near as bad as people make out him to be, especially this season. Yes, his GA isn't fantastic, but in terms of what he's doing for Arsenal in every other phase of play, what he's doing off the ball, he's still just so clearly an unbelievable winger. And 1v1, I think he's lost a bit of burst of pace after that hamstring injury, which has mitigated his effectiveness in the final third quite a lot. But I still think Saka's a fantastic player. And I think the conversations he's been put in as like being terrible and washed just aren't fair at all. And I think if Arsenal got an effective winger on the other side, like a Bradley Barcola, which is what they should have done in the summer, and what I said they should have done in the summer, but they got Eze instead, which makes a lot of sense. But no, if they'd have done that, I think we'd have seen Saka have a much better season, just because I think so often in games now, teams know Saka is Arsenal's only real threat. So they'll just go and put 2 or 3 players on him. And because he's lost that burst, he can't really perform under those circumstances now. But if you had a Barcola on the left, I don't think we'd see that as much. I think we'd see him more 1v1, maybe even 2v1. And I think in those situations, he would still be able to create to quite an effective level. Not that he should be in the team, but I think he deserves a shout. I also think Bowen deserves a shout.
No, I agree with. Oh my God. You know what? Bowen, it's so crazy with Bowen and this season, because it looked like he was going to have a horrid season going into the new year, because it just felt like he was playing well, but stuff just wasn't landing for him. But what he's done in 2026 is he's just still persevered, and I think he's just now become this creator of sorts for West Ham, which I never thought I would have seen. I always thought Jared Bowen at West Ham just would have been, the person that would have gotten a lot of goals, would have created, but not as much as he's scored. And now, seeing him just create for everybody, which, if we're going to be honest, in relative terms, this West Ham team, relative to the best teams in the league, is pretty weak. So for seeing him being able to create for weak players, it's actually pretty, it's great stuff. Watching him, play great when West Ham actually need him to play great. I also agree with the Saka thing. Saka, for me, again, this is why I don't really lead into public perception. This is a player who's had a good season. The problem is the numbers that show it, and the numbers are missing. So people will just look at that and be like, this is a player who, for his standards, generally speaking, is poor. But you actually need to, again, watch the team and see for yourself. And you know what? You don't even need to watch the team. You've got Madueke, who can't beat anybody. So you see the difference between those two players. Like, it goes to show how good Saka actually is and how important he actually is to this team.
Yeah, I think that just to go back to Bowen quickly, I think he's a quite similar arc to the one Mo Salah did at Liverpool. Because I've always profiled them as kind of similar players in terms of they're these high output wingers that maybe don't look the best on the eye. And what we saw with Salah is that he lost a little bit of pace, and we saw him become a much more efficient creator and kind of shift his game that way. And I think Bowen's done a similar thing. Not that he has lost that pace, but we have seen him shift away from maybe being this really prolific goal scorer type of player who's always going to run in behind to now being a slightly more creative, which I think is really interesting. And I wonder if Liverpool would go for him in the summer, which I think would be really stupid, and I don't think they should do. But it wouldn't surprise me if they went for a Jared Bowen as their replacement for Mo Salah. Anyway, left winger. I have two names again, and they're both wear blue. Which this team's becoming very biased because I'm obviously a City fan. You're basically a City fan as well. So well, we might as well have just put the City 11 in. But I've got Doku and Semenyo. I think there's one I prefer and one that probably deserves to be in the team.
Oh my, this is interesting. Because I don't know because I actually don't know who it is that you prefer, actually.
Do you have any other names that you'd put in the conversation quickly before we go for Doku versus Semenyo?
For left wing, the problem, I'm gonna go with no. And to be honest, the left wing position in the Premier League, if I'm going to be honest, it's been pretty poor. Even in world football, I could argue it's pretty poor. Not to say that the top wingers are
Pedro Neto, the big Chelsea
subject 49 and Pedro Neto. These two players, if anything, should be in the anti-Premier 11, which is a good idea for a podcast episode. Should you do it? I'm not going to be the guest for this, unfortunately. I don't think P will pick me for that one. But when you do, let me know when that episode's done, because I will definitely watch that, because it would be definitely funny. Yeah, left wing, no, not really. I had Semenyo and Doku as my only two shots.
Yeah, I think I'd put Semenyo in the team, but I think Doku is the better player. Because I love Doku. I don't think you can find anyone that likes Doku more than me. I just think he's so good. And people will use the stick of... People think the stick of, he doesn't score goals against him, but I don't think it particularly matters because when you look at Doku's role in the team, that's not his job. His job is to create chances, and he does that amazingly. If you use a good creative metric instead of XG, you will see that. And then, but also just in terms of what he does in build-up, you have an outlet like Jeremy Doku, who's probably the second best 1v1 dribbler in the world behind someone like Yamal. He will just drag you up the pitch with his pace. And that is such a tool to have. And then if you want to talk about gravity in the final third, just look at the Southampton game. Like, look at the impact he had there. He comes on the pitch. You can just give him the ball. He will create chances. And having that individual brilliance in a team is so important. And even if he's not creating the chances, just because people know he's so good, he's that threat, right? And you get 2, 3, maybe even 4 players sometimes all marking Doku, and then that creates the space elsewhere. Similar effect that Haaland has. If Haaland and Doku aren't on the pitch against Southampton, Nico G's shot that wins the game gets closed down because the players that would be closing him down are so worried about Doku and Haaland that it creates that space for him. And people will say he doesn't score goals, which is a fair criticism. I think it's something he does need to add to his game. But again, like I mentioned before, it's because his role is to be creative, and because of that, he doesn't shoot a lot. That's why he doesn't score goals, not because he's a bad finisher, because he's a pretty good finisher as it goes. He just doesn't shoot enough for me. Yeah,
agreed. Just on your statement on somebody liking Doku more than you also have, listen, I'm an honorary, I'm not a founder of the Doku fan club, but I'm a big fan of them. You can ask many content creators, Carell especially, massive Doku fan. For me, I think again, like the goal thing is it's the shooting. He doesn't shoot enough. So it's like again, public perception. The public want him to spam shots, to score more, and that would mean he creates less. So it's like you can't create, and you can't create as much as you score, especially in this City team. If you score more, you can't score more than the likes of Haaland. It's just not possible. It's just not possible to do that. What you can do, however, is create for Haaland, create for the more dangerous players. City have always found great wingers to do this. The likes of Sane, even the likes of Sane, the likes of Mahrez, like they've always facilitated well for the more dangerous finishers in the team. Grealish had this with Haaland for a 2-year spell in 22-23 and 23-24 to a degree, in facilitating for the likes of a Foden and Haaland to score. And Doku fits that.
The thing I would say about Doku with the goal scoring is I think it is something he can add to his game, and it's what takes him to the next level. Not necessarily by shooting more when he has the ball, because like you say, then you lose that creative value. But I'd like to see him add the easy goals to his game, like a bit Raheem Sterling-esque. I want to see him arrive at the back post and just tap it in, because so often you see Cherky just fizz a ball across the box, Haaland misses it, no one else is there. I'd like to see Doku being the guy who's there and scoring that goal, because then you're not losing that creative value, which I agree with you. I don't want to start seeing him cutting in and trying to do a Robin shot from the edge of the box, for example, because that's just not where his game is. His game's in creativity. But I think he talked about it as well in an interview with the Premier League recently. He wants to try and add that type of goal to his game. And I think that is how he elevates to the world-class level that I just don't think he's quite on yet, because his output isn't necessarily high enough. And I think Semenyo is almost the exact opposite, right? If you could merge them together, you'd get a brilliant player. Semenyo's great at scoring the goals. That's why we bought him. And he will often be criticised for the opposite thing of Doku, which is he doesn't do enough from open play. His touch is a bit clunky, which I think is fair. But again, I'd say that's not his job. Semenyo was brought in to score goals, which he has done fantastically. His output's been really good for City, and it was great for Bournemouth as well. And he's been brought in to be a beast out of possession, which again, he has done that to a point where Bernardo Silva doesn't need to do that job anymore to babysit Cherky. Semenyo's doing that, and Bernardo can go and do something else. So Semenyo's been, for me, like a massive success. And I think people want to try and criticize him for not being perfect, which I don't think is fair.
Yeah, neither do I. I had him on my left wing ultimately because of the defensive qualities he's given to this team. You made a great video about it when he signed, and I knew that was going to be the case because you showed that at Bournemouth as well. Again, I need to go back to the recent game with Burnley. The desire that he shows for that right side is huge, because I could imagine if it would have been against a better team, and again, you don't have a player like this, again, the opposition are just able to attack down Nunes' side with just Nunes there. And like, you have a player like Semenyo who again shows that kind of, defensive instinct. And again, for wingers especially, I think that's a quality that a lot of people overlook, and we need to actually look into that more in terms of the winger that you want to sign. What did they actually contribute to on the defensive end? That's not to say that they're going to be as dominant in the tackle as the midfielders and the fullbacks now, but or even the centre-backs to a degree. But again, showing that, yes, I can be active in the defensive phase. That's a great quality that Semenyo has, and he's always had this.
It's a shame we haven't seen him at right back yet, which could be coming soon, but you never know.
Oh, no.
Trust the video, man. Trust the video. Anyway, striker. Again, I think striker's very easy. It's obviously Igor Thiago. What a beast. What a player. No, I'm joking. It's Haaland.
Sorry, I know Igor Thiago is the shout, but I had Haaland here. Absolutely no brainer. I think for me, what he did in the first half of the season was an absolute joke. He does this every season now, where he just goes on this like rampage of scoring in every game conceivable, and again, even him, like, one thing that stood out to me again is the defensive qualities. I think what he's shown in the new year, what he's shown there, again, I'm gonna keep referring to your videos here because like you make them like you obviously make these videos so well that I'm able to touch on them on this. But again,
the guy wants to be invited back a bit too much. Good.
No, but like the defensive aspect that he's shown in the game against Arsenal, the game against Chelsea, the game against Newcastle at home, like these things again, like they don't go unnoticed for people that actually watch the sport. Obviously he's had this supposed drought of him not scoring in these Premier League games, but again, the sheer gravity of Haaland makes it so advantageous for City that they'll go and win games without him scoring anyway. They don't need him to score all the time like they did from August to January.
The thing I'd say about Haaland as well this season, I think his general play has gone to a much higher level than it has been previously. And he's still doing the goal scoring, which is obviously the main thing you want from Haaland. But in terms of dropping deep, maybe linking the play a bit more, passing it out wide, we've never really seen him do that before. And this season he has been doing it. You touched on the defensive work he's doing as well, which has been amazing. So often he's there in the last minute winning a big header in our own box, which is not what you'd expect Haaland to be doing necessarily. But I think the link-up play is a big thing for me. A game against Newcastle at home, we won 2-1, was a great example of it. I think it's arguably Haaland's best performance this season, and I don't think he even scored a goal in that game. But his general play was brilliant, whether that's like winning his duels, which is a massive thing, like we talked about right at the start. Like aerially, he's so dominant, and having that focal point, I think, is really nice, especially when you've got Donnarumma in goal. Having the option to just punt something into Haaland is absolutely necessary, because most of the time we won't be able to play through the press. And yeah, his leadership as well this season, like I say, he's led the team with that defensive work. I think he's been better than people give him credit for. And I do want to talk about Igor Thiago as well here. So I think there's a conversation here, not necessarily that Igor Thiago is really good, because I don't think he is. I think he's penalty farmed quite a lot. And then he's like the ultimate Brentford striker. Like, people, I did a TikTok live the other day, and a lot of the questions were, do you think a big club should sign Igor Thiago? And the answer is no. So I think he's a prime example of a striker who isn't scalable at all, because his whole game is, I'm fast, I'm going to run in behind, I might score 1v1. And like we talked about with the left backs, like the Bournemouth guy, who his name's just gone out of my head, Jesus Christ. Anyway, like we talked about with him. Truther, that's the one, thank you. But against low blocks, which is what you're playing against for big teams, you don't get the luxury of doing that. And that's actually why I think Erling Haaland is by a mile the best striker in the world, because he's putting up these numbers and he's not playing his game. Like, his game is what we saw at Dortmund. Haaland's at his best when he's running in behind with space. And he doesn't get to do that for City. He's had to reinvent himself as this like box striker, this poacher, which, he's still the best in the world at that. But that's not even the football he wants to play, and yet he still dominates at it. Like, I always think, imagine if Haaland went to Barcelona. Like, that'd be crazy.
Oh my God. I think with Haaland, I mean, Yamal just Trivela, like, you might genuinely have to, FootMob would genuinely have to make up a stat for how many Trivelas Yamal averages if him and Haaland play together. Like that's how inevitable that pass would be. But I think for me, like, the difference between Haaland and Igor Thiago is, like, Haaland for me is just the epitome of what we're having in the football world right now. You can't stop great players. Like, you just can't stop these guys. Like, you can throw whatever you want to throw at them. Like, for me, the epitome of how good Haaland was for me was the Brentford game away at Brentford and the Bournemouth game at home. Brentford defended deep, only for Haaland to pack them in anyway. Bournemouth played high, and Haaland still abused their backline anyway. You can't stop these guys. Like, these guys are just too good. They know how to beat everything. But Haaland is so good that teams generally have to look at him and be like, what are we willing to give up? Like, what are we willing to give up? If Haaland can't score, we have to make someone else. And if someone else does, we have to tip the hat off to them. And that is how I was able to separate an Erling Haaland, from an Igor Thiago. You can stop Igor Thiago. It's very simple to do so, actually. I'm not going to do that because I think, A, it's too easy of a job to tell people this, and B, if I end up telling people this, I'll end up on a Premier League analysis team. But with Haaland, again, what football's finding so hard is how to stop these great players, like the likes of Yamal, the likes of a Cherki. You can't stop these guys, so you have to inevitably accept your fate, that you're going to die at the hands of their sword. So the real question is just going to be, what are you willing to give up? And I think that's what Haaland epitomizes for striker play in the world right now.
Yeah, I think the only reason those conversations between, like, it's every year Haaland will get compared to the second best, and the second best is way below. Last season it was Isak. It's like this whole thing of, is Isak better than Haaland? It's like every bit of data will tell you no, he's not. No. And every moment of watching him will tell you no. But people want their guy to be the best. It's quite boring, Haaland always being the best, I think, and that's why you get these conversations. But also, it's something I did a video on the other day. I think I called it, I can't remember what I called it now, but it's like this phenomenon where you see a player's level's up here, right? And the other player is here. But maybe, like, if Haaland underperforms slightly and this other player overperforms, people judge their opinion on that player based on how much they've over or underperformed rather than the objective level. So Haaland underperforming is still better than anybody else overperforming, but people judge that gap from where they expect.
And this was the case last season.
Sorry, go on.
And this was the case last season. You saw this. You saw this the case last season. Haaland last season clearly underperformed from the last two seasons that we saw of him, and then it took Isak to have, again, a stellar season, and people were putting him in the same conversation. It was never a conversation.
And anyway, that is our team. I'll read out said team We've got David Raya in goal, Nico O'Reilly at left back, centre back partnership of Gabriel and Saliba, with an honourable mention to Gahey, who was very close. We've got Reece James at right back, Rodri in DM with an honourable mention to Elliot Anderson, Declan Rice at the number 8, Bruno Fernandes in the 10, Cherky on the right, Semenyo off the left, and Igor Thiago up front. Erling Haaland up front. I've done that joke twice now, running it into the ground. And that is the end of the podcast. Thanks for listening, guys. Thank you, Gigi, for coming on and having a great chat. And if you're listening on Spotify, give us a 5-star rating. It really helps the show. Make sure to hit a follow as well. Likewise, if you're listening on YouTube, hit the subscribe, hit a like, and on either platform, get down in the comments. Tell us what you changed about our team this season. Hopefully nothing, and we're objectively right, but I think that is unlikely. And join us next week for a mystery guest. Ooh, I wonder who it could be. You'll find out next week.